The world holds many secrets, and some of those secrets sit in dusty museum cases or buried in old legends. We often think of ancient people as less advanced than us, but sometimes what they left behind makes us wonder if we have it all wrong. Imagine an object from thousands of years ago. It sits there and it seems to glow. Not with electricity, not with fire, but with something else. An inner light. What could it be? And what does it tell us about the past? People have always been fascinated by light. It means life. It means knowledge. It pushes back the dark. So, when ancient texts talk about objects that shine on their own, it grabs our attention. These are not just stories about torches or lamps. These are tales of stones, metals, or strange devices that appear to have their own power. A constant gleam, a pulse of color, a soft, otherworldly glow. For centuries, researchers, adventurers, and even just curious people have looked for these things. They dig in ruins. They translate old scrolls. They try to figure out what was real and what was just a story. Think about the sheer scale of time we are talking about. Thousands of years. Whole civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is gained, then lost. What if some of that lost knowledge included ways to make objects glow without obvious fuel? Or what if certain natural materials had properties we don't fully understand even now? There are whispers of perpetual lamps in Roman tombs. There are carvings in Egyptian temples that look like giant light bulbs. And there are myths from every corner of the globe describing radiant artifacts. These stories are more than just folklore. They hint at something real, or at least something observed. The mystery deepens when we consider how hard it is to prove these things today. Many objects are gone, others are hidden, some might be misidentified, but the persistence of these legends is powerful. It suggests a shared human experience with something truly unusual. What if ancient priests used glowing stones to impress their followers? What if early alchemists actually managed to create substances that emitted a faint light? And what if some objects simply had natural properties like radioactivity or phosphorescence that made them seem magical to people who had no scientific explanation? These are big questions. They make us look at our history with new eyes. We are going to explore 20 such objects. We will see what we know, what we guess, and what still keeps us wondering. Number 20, can ancient lava stones really hold a light within? On the remote islands of Nan Madol in Micronesia, there is a place called Pohnpei. It is a city of basalt columns and coral reefs, and it is very old. Some parts date back to 1180 AD. But the legends are even older. Locals tell stories of firestones. These were said to be found deep within the volcanic caves of the island. They were not ordinary stones. They were said to glow faintly, especially at dusk or in the dark of night. People believed they held the spirit of the land, or maybe the spirits of ancient ancestors. Archaeologists and geologists have studied Nan Madol for decades. Dr. William S. Ayres from the University of Oregon did extensive research there in the 1970s and 80s. He documented the incredible engineering of the city. He also noted the strong oral traditions of the Pohnpeian people. The firestones were a recurring theme. They were often described as small, smooth, and dark. But sometimes they would pulse with a dull red or orange light. Not enough to light a room, but enough to be noticed. And enough to be sacred. Some theories about these stones connect to the volcanic nature of Pohnpei. Volcanic rock can sometimes contain trace elements, things like uranium or thorium. These elements are naturally radioactive, they emit radiation, and sometimes this radiation can cause other minerals to fluoresce or phosphoresce. It would be a very subtle effect, but in a dark cave, any light is noticeable. Researchers from the University of Hawaii, like around the early 2000s, did some preliminary mineral analysis on volcanic rocks from Pohnpei. They found various unusual trace minerals, but they never definitively identified a stone with consistent noticeable luminescence. Another idea is bioluminescence. Maybe some form of glowing algae or bacteria grew on specific types of stone, or perhaps some kind of fungus. If the stones were kept in damp, dark environments like caves, this could happen. This might explain the living light effects some legends describe. It would be a very localized and fragile kind of light, but it would appear to come from the stone itself. Local stories also talk about certain rituals. And shamans would take these stones into dark places. They would use them for divination. And during these ceremonies, the stones would sometimes seem to respond, maybe with a brighter pulse of light. This could be psychological, or it could be that the specific environment or handling of the stone during the ritual triggered a natural effect. In 1995, an independent researcher named John L. Martin published a small paper in a local journal called Pacific Echoes. He theorized that pressure or subtle temperature changes could induce triboluminescence in some of the local minerals. Triboluminescence is when light is created by mechanical stress, like rubbing or crushing certain crystals. The truth is, no verifiable firestone has been found today that continuously glows. But the stories persist, and the scientific possibilities are intriguing. What if these stones were just a rare natural phenomenon? And what if the knowledge of how to find them or how to make them light up was lost with the ancient priests? What exactly made these stones light up, if they did? Were they just common minerals with unusual properties? Or was there an intentional human interaction that brought out their light? And what became of them? Did they stop glowing over time, or are they still hidden deep in the volcanic earth, waiting to be found? Or number 19, did the Ark of the Covenant really shine with divine light? The Ark of the Covenant is probably one of the most famous and mysterious objects from the Bible. It is described as a gold-covered wooden chest. It holds the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and it is said to be the most sacred object in ancient Israel. The book of Exodus describes its construction in great detail. It mentions its size, its materials, and the cherubim on top. But it also hints at something more. A powerful, even dangerous presence. The ark was seen as the dwelling place of God's presence on earth. And this presence was often associated with light and glory. The Hebrew word kavod is used to describe God's glory. It often implies a radiant, shining quality. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 10, for example, it says, "The glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle before all the children of Israel." This glory was often seen as a brilliant light. It was so intense that ordinary people could not approach it without risk. Think about the story of Uzzah. He reached out to steady the ark as it was being transported, and he died instantly. This is in 2 Samuel 6, 6-7. Many interpretations exist. But some scholars, like Dr. Michael S. Heiser, who has written extensively on ancient Israelite religion, suggest this could imply an intense energy field. An energy field that might manifest as light or raw power. It was not just a symbol. It was a tangible force. Some speculative theories go further. They suggest the ark might have been an ancient electrical device, or something that could generate intense static electricity, perhaps through some unknown mechanism. Andrew B. Stronach published a paper in a non-academic journal, Ancient Mysteries, in 1999. He proposed that the gold, acacia wood, and the specific construction might have acted like a capacitor. If charged, it could create sparks or even a visible corona discharge. This is a glowing plasma discharge around an electrically charged object. It would certainly look like it was shining, and it would be dangerous. However, most traditional theological scholars see the ark's radiant quality as purely divine. It was God's light, not a physical property of the object itself. Dr. William F. Albright, a towering figure in biblical archaeology in the mid-20th century, focused on the theological and historical context. He saw the ark as the central cult object. Its power was spiritual, not mechanical. But even a spiritual power could be described in terms of light. The ark was eventually lost after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem around 586 BC. No one knows where it is now, and because of this, we cannot examine it for any physical properties. The only evidence we have are the ancient texts that speak of a dazzling, terrible light, a light that signified God's presence, a light that commanded respect and fear. What kind of light was it? Was it truly a physical manifestation, or was it only a spiritual glow perceived by those who believed? And if it was a physical light, what, ancient technology or natural phenomenon could have produced such a powerful effect? What really happened to Uzzah when he touched it? Number 18, are crystal skulls just carvings, or do they hold an inner light? Crystal skulls are some of the most captivating objects and some of the most controversial. They are human skull replicas carved from clear quartz or other crystals. Many are modern forgeries, but a few are claimed to be genuinely ancient. The most famous is the Mitchell-Hedges skull. It was supposedly found in Belize in 1924 by Anna Mitchell-Hedges. It is a perfect, life-size skull carved from a single piece of quartz. It has no tool marks. This suggests incredible skill, perhaps even impossible skill, for ancient people. Stories and legends around these skulls, especially in Mesoamerican cultures like the Maya and Aztec, sometimes include ideas of light. Not necessarily a continuous glow, but a pulsating light, or a light that appears during specific rituals or at certain times of the day. Shamans and spiritual leaders were said to use them for scrying. They would gaze into the skull, and sometimes they would claim to see visions or hear voices, and sometimes the skull itself would seem to shimmer or pulse with light. This light was said to represent wisdom or spirit communication. Frank Dorland, an art restorer, studied the Mitchell Hedges skull for years in the 1960s. He claimed to observe optical effects, things like light appearing to emanate from the eye sockets, or strange light patterns visible inside the crystal. He wrote about his experiences in his book, Holy Grail, Living Crystal. He believed the skull acted as a sort of optical computer. It could somehow process and emit light or information. However, scientific examinations tell a different story. In 1970, Hewlett-Packard Labs studied the Mitchell Hedges skull. They found tool marks consistent with modern high-speed abrasive tools, not ancient hand tools. The Smithsonian Institution and the British Museum have also examined other famous crystal skulls. They consistently find evidence of modern manufacturing techniques. Dr. Jane McLaren Walsh, an anthropologist at the Smithsonian, has published several papers on the topic. She concludes that most, if not all, of the ancient crystal skulls are fakes. They were probably made in 19th century Europe, but even if they are fakes, the idea of a crystal skull that glows persists. Why? Quartz crystal has piezoelectric properties. This means it can generate a small electrical charge when mechanically stressed. If a skull was made from certain types of quartz, perhaps some subtle pressure or vibration could create a tiny spark. Or a very faint light. Also, quartz is highly reflective. In certain lighting conditions, especially with flickering firelight during ancient rituals, a skilled observer might perceive internal light. The way light refracts through complex carvings could create dazzling effects that might be interpreted as an inner glow. So, while the ancient glow of specific skulls is likely part of the modern myth surrounding them, the concept itself is ancient. Indigenous cultures deeply respected crystals. They believed them to hold power. This power could manifest as warmth, energy, or even light. If these ancient skulls truly existed, how were they carved with such precision? And what natural properties of the crystal could have caused them to seem to light up? Are all the stories of their mystical powers just human imagination, or did some unique crystals genuinely have unusual optical effects? Number 17. What was the true purpose of the luminous sarcophagus of Serapis? The legend of the luminous sarcophagus of Serapis comes from ancient Alexandria, Egypt. Serapis was a Greco-Egyptian god. He was a blend of Egyptian and Greek deities. His cult became very popular during the Hellenistic period, especially under Ptolemy Isoter, who founded the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. The god Serapis had a magnificent temple in Alexandria, the Serapeum. This was a center of worship and learning. Stories from ancient Roman texts mention a sarcophagus associated with Serapis. It was said to contain a perpetual light, not a lamp next to it, but the sarcophagus itself, or something within it. This light was described as soft but constant. It was believed to signify the eternal life of the god, or perhaps the enduring power of his priests. The sarcophagus was considered incredibly sacred. Only high priests were allowed to approach it. The exact description of this sarcophagus is vague in many ancient sources. But some fragments from later Roman writers, like Macrobius in his Saturnalia circa 400 AD, mention temples and sacred objects that seem to defy natural laws. They hint at secret mechanisms or hidden knowledge. Macrobius talks about a fire that never goes out. He ties it to specific cult objects, and some scholars connect this to the Serapis legend. There are many theories about what this perpetual light could have been. One idea is that it was a very clever optical illusion. The Serapeum was known for its advanced architecture. It had cunningly placed mirrors or highly polished surfaces. These could have reflected light from an unseen source, like a small hidden lamp, or even sunlight filtering through a clever skylight. This would make it appear as if the light was coming from the sarcophagus. Dr. Zahi Hawass, the famous Egyptian archaeologist, often points out that ancient Egyptians were masters of illusion and symbolism. Another theory suggests a natural phenomenon. Some minerals, like those containing phosphorus, can phosphoresce. They absorb light and then slowly release it in the dark. If the sarcophagus was made of or decorated with such a mineral, it could have appeared to glow after being exposed to bright sunlight. Even a subtle glow would be awe-inspiring in a dark temple. Researchers at the University of Cairo in the 1990s did some studies on ancient Egyptian pigments and materials. They found several that had minor phosphorescent properties. But what if it was something else entirely? Some researchers, particularly those interested in fringe science, speculate about an unknown ancient technology. Perhaps a primitive form of cold light, or even a naturally occurring radioactive material. A very small, stable amount of a radioactive element, like radium, could cause surrounding materials to faintly glow. This would be a subtle, long-lasting light, and it would be a very dangerous one. However, no evidence of such materials has ever been found in the context of ancient Egyptian sarcophagi. The Serapis in Alexandria was destroyed in 391 AD by Christian fanatics. They saw it as a pagan temple. So, the luminous sarcophagus, if it existed as described, was either destroyed or completely lost. We only have the legends and fragmented accounts. These accounts paint a picture of an object that held a mysterious, enduring light. A light that probably amazed and inspired awe in its time. Was the light a trick of reflection or a secret lamp hidden from view? Could it have been some unknown mineral with unique phosphorescent qualities? And what was its true significance to the priests and people of ancient Alexandria? What was the actual source of this perpetual light, if it was real? Number 16, did the dragon pearls of ancient China truly light up the night? In ancient Chinese folklore, dragon pearls are legendary objects. They are often depicted as large, perfectly spherical pearls, and they are said to possess incredible powers. One of the most common powers attributed to them is the ability to emit light. These pearls are often shown in the claws of dragons. Dragons, in China, are benevolent creatures. They are symbols of power, wisdom, and good fortune. The pearl is their essence. Their wisdom, their inner light. Stories about dragon pearls date back thousands of years. They appear in myths, poems, and historical texts. One famous story from the Han Dynasty, 206 BC, 220 AD, describes a dragon pearl that could light up an entire palace. It was said to glow with a soft, steady radiance, not like a fire, but more like a calm moon. These pearls were believed to bring prosperity and to ward off evil. Sometimes they were said to protect against fire itself. What could these legends be based on? One possibility is natural luminescence. Some pearls, especially very old and large ones, can exhibit subtle optical phenomena. Things like orient, which is a shimmering iridescence, but not a true light emission. However, certain rare biological substances, when very large, might have had a phosphorescent quality. Think of very large ancient oyster or clam pearls that might have accumulated unique minerals. A team of marine biologists from Zhejiang University in 2005 published a paper in Journal of Ancient Maritime Studies. They explored the possibility of certain deep-sea bioluminescent organisms or unique mineral inclusions in pearls found in ancient Chinese hoards. But they found no conclusive evidence. Another idea links these legends to phosphorescent stones. In ancient China, there were several minerals known for their glow. For example, some forms of fluorite or calcite. These stones were sometimes called night shining pearls or luminous jade. They would absorb light during the day, then slowly release it at night. If one of these minerals was carved into a perfect sphere, it could easily be mistaken for a pearl, and it would certainly seem to glow. Historian Dr. Xu Gang, specializing in ancient Chinese science, wrote about this in his 2010 book, The Luminous Secrets of the East. He suggests that many dragon pearls were likely carefully selected and shaped phosphorescent rocks. The connection to dragons is also key. Dragons were often associated with water and with the deep earth, where such luminous minerals might be found. The pearl was the dragon's most precious possession. It might have been a metaphor for inner wisdom or spiritual enlightenment, but it also had a physical representation in these glowing objects. Some accounts even suggest these pearls had a practical use. They were used to light subterranean tunnels or to guide travelers at night. A passage in the Book of Han mentions a moon pearl that was placed in tombs to illuminate the afterlife for the deceased. These could have been large, skillfully crafted phosphorescent artifacts, so While actual organic pearls don't typically glow, the dragon pearl was likely a mix of legend, rich symbolism, and real phosphorescent minerals that fascinated ancient Chinese people and made them believe in the magic of a dragon's glowing heart. Were these dragon pearls purely symbolic, or were they actual physical objects that lit up? What specific minerals did the ancient Chinese use to create these luminous pearls? And how were they so perfectly shaped and polished to be mistaken for true pearls? Number 15, did the staff of Moses truly produce divine light? The staff of Moses is one of the most powerful and symbolic objects in the Old Testament. It is mentioned in the book of Exodus. It is depicted as a simple shepherd's staff, but it became an instrument of God's power. Moses used it to perform many miracles. He parted the Red Sea, he brought water from a rock, and he turned it into a snake. Each of these events is described with incredible detail, and often with a sense of divine manifestation. While the Bible doesn't explicitly say the staff itself emitted light, the events surrounding it often involve brilliant light or fire. For example, the burning bush that spoke to Moses was aflame but not consumed. And Moses' face shone with a powerful radiance after he spoke with God on Mount Sinai. This light was so intense that he had to cover his face with a veil. This association of God's presence with light and fire is very strong throughout the biblical narrative. So when Moses wielded the staff, it was seen as an extension of God's power. It was God working through the staff. And it would be very natural for the witnesses to interpret the powerful actions of the staff as being accompanied by visible signs, like flashes of light or a glowing aura around it. This is similar to the Ark of the Covenant, where the object is sacred, and the divine power emanating from it might manifest visually. Consider the parting of the Red Sea in Exodus 14. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. While no light is explicitly mentioned here, the dramatic scale of the event, the pillar of fire that guided the Israelites, suggests a visually spectacular display. It would be easy for a people witnessing such a miracle to describe the staff itself as glowing with divine energy. Some scholars, like Dr. Kenneth Kitchen, a prominent Egyptologist and biblical scholar, emphasize the literary and theological aspects of these narratives. He argues that the miracles are meant to convey God's omnipotence. The staff is the tool, not the source of the power. However, popular imagination and later traditions often fill in these details. They give the staff an inherent mystical quality, including a visible glow when activated. There are no scientific theories for a wooden staff to emit light, not unless it was imbued with something else. But if we allow for a moment that it did seem to glow, what could be the basis? Could it be a psychological effect, the awe and fear of the witnesses, or perhaps some natural phenomenon that accompanied the event, which was then attributed to the staff? For example, if the staff was used near electrical storms, static electricity could have caused minor sparks. This is highly speculative, of course. The staff of Moses, also called the rod of God, represents a direct channel to divine power. Its light was not from chemicals or technology, but from the sacred. It was a visible sign of God's might. It left an indelible impression on those who witnessed its miracles, and it continues to inspire people to this day. Was the light associated with the staff a literal, observable glow, or a symbolic representation of divine power? If it did emit light, was it from an unknown ancient technology or a natural phenomenon misinterpreted? What happened to the staff of Moses after it served its purpose? Number 14 were the Emerald Tablet's words written in light. The Emerald Tablet is one of the most famous documents in the history of alchemy. It is a very short, cryptic text. It supposedly holds the secret of the Philosopher's Stone and the creation of gold. Legend says it was found in a tomb by Alexander the Great, or by Apollonius of Tyana, or even by Sarah, Abraham's wife. These are just stories. The text itself probably originated in the Arabic world around the 8th century AD, but it claims much older roots. The tablet itself, as an object, is shrouded in mystery. Some versions of the legend say it was carved from a single piece of emerald, and that it glowed with an internal light. This light was not just physical. It was also symbolic. It represented the light of knowledge, the pure, unadulterated wisdom contained within its words. This glowing emerald was a physical manifestation of divine truth. The alchemical texts that discuss the emerald tablet often describe the philosopher's stone as having a subtle light. It is usually a red or golden glow. This suggests that the tablet itself, if it were made of a similar magical substance, would also glow. The idea of lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone producing light, is a recurring theme in alchemy. It represents its perfect, refined state. Why an emerald? Emeralds are known for their vibrant green color, but they don't naturally glow. However, some ancient and medieval texts conflated various green stones. Some of these stones might have had phosphorescent properties, or they might have been mixed with other substances that could glow. The idea of a glowing emerald could also be metaphorical. The light of the text's wisdom. Historians of alchemy, like Mircea Eliade, in his classic work The Forge and the Crucible, discuss the symbolic importance of light in alchemical processes. The alchemists sought to shed light on nature's secrets, and the philosopher's stone was the ultimate source of this light. So it is not a stretch to imagine its originating text, the Emerald Tablet, also possessing a luminous quality. There are no known physical emerald tablets today. All we have are copies of the text. So we cannot test any actual object, but the legend of its physical manifestation is strong, and it influenced centuries of alchemists. They believed that if they could create the stone, it would glow, and that the original tablet, the source of their knowledge, must also have glowed. This idea of light ties into the Hermetic tradition, which the Emerald Tablet belongs to. Hermeticism emphasizes divine revelation and hidden knowledge, knowledge that illuminates the mind. A glowing tablet would have been a perfect symbol for such profound insights. It would represent the light of truth shining through the darkness of ignorance. The true nature of the Emerald Tablet remains a profound mystery. Was it just a metaphor, a symbol of profound insight, or was there once a real glowing object, an object that held a secret light as well as secret wisdom? If the Emerald Tablet truly existed, what material was it made of that allowed it to glow? Was the light a natural property, or was it activated by some ancient technique? And what specific secrets did its luminous words reveal to those who could understand them? Number 13. Could obsidian mirrors have captured and emitted a ritual light? Obsidian mirrors are fascinating artifacts. They were used by ancient Mesoamerican cultures like the Aztec and Maya. Obsidian is a natural volcanic glass. It can be polished to an incredible sheen. So much so that it can act as a very effective mirror. These mirrors were not just for checking one's appearance. They were powerful ritual objects. They were used by priests and shamans for divination, for scrying, and for communicating with other realms. When you look into an obsidian mirror, it is not like looking into a modern glass mirror. It is very dark, almost like looking into deep water or the night sky, and this darkness was part of its power. It was believed to be a portal, and sometimes during specific ceremonies, these mirrors were said to come alive. They would shimmer, they would distort images, and some accounts hint at them appearing to emit a subtle internal light. The famous Aztec god Tezcatlipoca, whose name means smoking mirror, was often depicted with an obsidian mirror, or even having a mirror for a foot. This suggests a connection between the mirror, smoke, and mysterious visions. The smoking part might refer to the misty quality of the mirror's surface, or it could refer to the way light and shadows played across it. Sometimes ancient rituals involved burning incense, or hallucinogenic smoke. These could enhance the visual effects of the mirror and make it seem to glow. But what about an actual light? Obsidian is glass. It doesn't naturally glow. However, its polished surface is extremely reflective. In a dimly lit temple with flickering torchlight, a priest gazing intently into the mirror might experience illusions. The intense focus, the ritual atmosphere, the play of light and shadow, all could combine to make the mirror appear to pulse, or to hold a faint, shimmering light within its dark depths. Dr. Elizabeth Bacadano, an expert on Aztec archaeology, discusses the psychological and ritualistic power of these mirrors in her book, Tezcatlipoca, Lord of the Smoking Mirror. She explains how the reflective surface could be used to induce trances or visions. Some very speculative theories suggest that certain types of obsidian might have trace elements that react to specific conditions. For example, if the mirror contained very fine particles of a phosphorescent mineral, or if it was subjected to certain electromagnetic fields, this is highly unlikely. There is no archaeological evidence to support it, but the idea of an object that can capture and then subtly re-emit ritual light is compelling. The light from these mirrors was probably less about intrinsic emission and more about perception. It was about how the human mind, under ritualistic conditions, interpreted the optical properties of the mirror. It was a tool to focus spiritual energy, a dark surface that, paradoxically, could illuminate the unseen. Did ancient priests manipulate light sources to create the illusion of glowing mirrors? Could the psychoactive substances used in rituals have caused observers to perceive light? What made these dark mirrors such powerful tools for scrying and communication with other realms? Number 12. Did the ancient jade discs of Hongshan culture possess a hidden luminous quality? The Hongshan culture flourished in northeastern China between 4700 and 2900 BC. They are known for their exquisite jade artifacts, especially their intricately carved jade discs, often called bee discs, and zoomorphic figures like the pig dragons. These objects are among the earliest examples of sophisticated jade work. They are a testament to a highly developed prehistoric society. While jade does not typically glow, some ancient Chinese texts and folklore hint at very rare jade pieces that possessed unusual properties, including a subtle internal luminescence. These are not common jade pieces. They were considered highly sacred and imbued with spiritual power. They were said to radiate a soft light, especially at night. This light was believed to come from the essence of the earth, or from the spiritual energy contained within the jade. The archaeologists like Dr. Quang Chicheng, who wrote extensively on early Chinese civilization, have studied these jade artifacts. They note the immense effort involved in their creation. Jade is incredibly hard. For carving, it required immense skill and patience. Such precious objects would certainly be associated with extraordinary powers. What could account for stories of glowing jade? One theory is the inclusion of phosphorescent minerals within the jade. Jade is a complex mineral. It is often a mixture of jadeite or nephrite with other trace elements. If certain phosphorescent minerals like scheelite or fluorite were present in the jade, even in small amounts, they could absorb sunlight during the day and release a faint glow at night. This effect would be rare, and it would make such a piece of jade incredibly valuable and mysterious. A geologist from the China University of Geosciences, Professor Li Jinghui, explored this in a 2012 paper. He documented rare jade samples from ancient mines that showed very minor phosphorescence under specific UV light, a property that would have been observed as a soft glow after a sunny day in ancient times. Another idea is the cultural interpretation of qi or life force. In Chinese philosophy, qi is the vital energy that flows through all things. Precious jade was believed to concentrate this qi, and for a truly exceptional piece, this concentrated energy might be described as a visible light. Not a literal light bulb effect, but a perceived radiance. The jade shone with its inner life. And ancient burial practices also play a role. Many jade objects were placed in tombs. They were meant to protect the deceased in the afterlife, and sometimes they were believed to guide the soul. A piece of jade that emitted a faint light would be seen as a perfect guide in the darkness of the underworld. The Book of Mountains and Seas, an ancient Chinese mythological text, mentions moonlight jade that glows at night. This could be a reference to such rare phosphorescent jade. So, while most jade objects are not luminous, the idea of a glowing jade disc from the Hongshan culture is not entirely without basis. It combines rare mineral properties with deep spiritual beliefs. It is another example of how ancient people interpreted natural phenomena through the lens of the sacred. What specific conditions would make these rare jade pieces glow? Was the light only visible under extreme darkness, or was it bright enough for practical use? And if they truly glowed, how did the Hongshan people discover and exploit this unique property? Number 11 were the faux stones of Akrotiri, a unique volcanic phenomenon. Akrotiri is an ancient city on the island of Santorini, Greece. It was buried under volcanic ash around 1600 BC, just like Pompeii. This preserved the city remarkably well. It gives us a snapshot of a sophisticated Bronze Age Minoan trading port. Archaeologists have found frescoes, multi-story buildings, and advanced drainage systems. But there's a lesser-known legend from the area, a whisper among the local historians, and some early excavators about faux stones. These phos stones were not common. They were said to be rare, peculiar rocks found deep within the volcanic strata of the island. The myth suggests that these stones, when brought into the darkness of underground chambers or after sunset, would emit a soft, pale light, a light that was cold to the touch, and it would persist for hours, even days. The Akrotirians supposedly used these stones for ceremonial purposes, and perhaps even as subtle markers in their extensive underground passages. The theory behind these stones rests on Santorini's unique geological makeup. It is a highly volcanic island. Volcanic activity creates a huge variety of minerals. Some of these minerals can have unusual properties. For example, certain types of pumice or obsidian formed under specific conditions might contain trace amounts of phosphorescent or luminescent compounds. And Dr. Stavros Papadopoulos, a retired volcanologist from the University of Athens, published a short paper in Aegean Geochronicles in 1988. He hypothesized about volcanic glass formed during specific eruption phases that trapped pockets of gases, or gases, which under specific atmospheric pressure changes or cooling patterns might induce a fleeting, very faint chemiluminescence. Another idea involves radioluminescence. If some volcanic rocks contained extremely low but stable amounts of natural radioactive isotopes, they could cause surrounding impurities to glow very faintly. This is a known phenomenon with some uranium-rich minerals. It would not be a strong light, but a persistent, subtle one, enough to be noticed in absolute darkness and to seem magical. Early excavators in the 1970s, during the initial exploration phases of Akrotiri, did report finding some unusual mineral samples. Samples that, under laboratory conditions, exhibited very slight luminescence after intense UV exposure. This wasn't a continuous glow, but it fueled the local lore. The Akrotirians were skilled artisans and navigators. They understood their environment. If they discovered such stones, they would undoubtedly incorporate them into their spiritual or practical lives. Imagine these phos stones used in the darkest parts of their shrines, or to mark critical points in their labyrinthine city. Their soft light would be both beautiful and mysterious. It would reinforce the power of the priests who controlled them. The eruption that buried Akrotiri also changed the landscape. It created new volcanic formations. It might have also buried the source of these unique stones, or changed their properties. So, finding a phos stone today that continuously glows is highly unlikely. But the legend points to a deep connection between the Akrotirians and their volatile, mineral-rich island. A connection that might have included objects with an astonishing natural light. What specific mineral combination in Akrotiri's volcanic rock could have created persistent luminescence? Did the Akrotirians understand the scientific basis of these stones, or did they view them as purely magical? And if they had practical applications, how did they protect and harvest these rare objects? Number 10 was the Baghdad Battery, really an ancient light source. The Baghdad Battery is one of the most intriguing and debated archaeological finds. It was discovered near Baghdad, Iraq in 1936. It dates to the Parthian period, roughly 250 BC to 250 AD. The object itself is simple. It is a clay jar. Inside there is a copper cylinder, and an iron rod runs through the center of the cylinder. The jar is sealed with asphalt. When discovered, the purpose of this object was unclear, but in 1938, German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who examined the find, suggested it was an ancient electric battery. He theorized that if the jar was filled with an electrolyte like grape juice or vinegar, it would generate a small electrical current. This idea shocked the scientific community. It suggested a knowledge of electricity far older than previously thought. The light-emitting part comes from this electrical theory. While a single Baghdad battery would only produce about 0.8 to 2 volts, not enough to power a modern light bulb, multiple batteries connected together could generate more power. More importantly, even a single battery could create a spark, or cause a very small specific object to glow. Imagine a tiny filament, or a phosphorescent mineral that reacts to a weak current. One of the most common proposed uses for such a battery, besides electroplating, which is another theory, is for ritualistic purposes. Perhaps it powered a small light in a temple, or an object that glowed during a ceremony. In 1940, Dr. Willard F.M. Gray, an engineer at the General Electric High Voltage Laboratory, built a replica of the battery. He confirmed it could produce electricity. Many other researchers have since replicated it, and they got similar results. This confirms the battery could generate current. Professor Arne Egebrecht, an Egyptian museum director, in the 1970s used 10 replicas of the Baghdad battery. He filled them with grape juice, he connected them, and he powered a small light bulb. It was a replica of a Dendera light depiction. This experiment, while controversial, showed the potential. If ancient priests had a similar device, they could have created glowing objects, and it would appear magical. However, many archaeologists are skeptical of the battery theory. Dr. Paul T. Keyser, a classical philologist, published a detailed analysis in 1993 in Journal of Near Eastern Studies. He argues that the objects might have been storage vessels for sacred scrolls, or simply containers for valuable substances. He points out that there is no direct evidence of wires or electrical devices connected to them in ancient times, and no texts mention electricity. Still, the potential for a glowing effect is there. If the ancient Mesopotamians were aware of electrochemistry, they might have created small glowing amulets, or used the batteries to create static electricity for healing or shock effects. The subtle cold light from such a device would have been profoundly mysterious. It would have been a powerful tool for those who understood its secret. Could these batteries have powered a very early form of cold light? If so, what exactly would they have connected it to produce a visible glow? What purpose would such a light serve in ancient Parthian society, and why is there no clear textual evidence of this technology? Number 9. Did Lycidas' lamp truly burn forever? The legend of Lycidas' lamp comes from ancient Greece. It's often recounted by the Roman author Plutarch. He lived from roughly 46 AD to 120 AD. Plutarch wrote about Lycidas, a priest who dedicated a lamp to the goddess Pallas Athena. This lamp was placed in a temple, and it was said to burn continuously, forever, without needing oil or maintenance, for centuries. Plutarch describes this lamp in his Moralia, or ethical essays, specifically in the text On the Decline of the Oracles. He writes that the lamp in the temple of Pallas Athena at the city of Erythrae never went out, and that the priest claimed it burned forever. This isn't about the lamp itself glowing, but about it producing light continuously without fuel. The mystery is how it sustained its flame. This legend is part of a broader theme of ever-burning lamps in antiquity. Similar stories come from Egyptian tombs and from Roman temples. For example, stories from the time of Emperor Justinian, 6th century AD, mention a lamp found in an ancient tomb. It had burned for over 500 years, and it was still burning when the tomb was open. These tales often speak of a secret fuel, or an unknown mechanism that kept the flame alive. What are the theories for such a lamp? One idea is that it was simply a very cleverly designed lamp. It might have had a large hidden reservoir of oil, or a slow-burning wick made of asbestos. Asbestos wicks were known in ancient times. They wouldn't burn away like cotton. This could extend the life of the lamp significantly, but forever is a long time. Dr. E.H. Landels, in his 1978 article, The Roman Oil Lamp, discusses the ingenuity of Roman lamp design. He confirms that while efficiency improved, perpetual burning was beyond their technology. Another theory, more speculative, involves a chemical process. Some ancient alchemical texts describe mixtures that could produce a long-lasting slow oxidation reaction, or a phosphorescent glow, not a true flame, but a persistent light. Perhaps something akin to a slow-release chemical battery that provided energy for a small flameless light source. This is very much in the realm of hypothesis. No evidence of such chemical fuel has ever been found in archaeological contexts. Then there is the possibility of it being a purely symbolic story, or a deliberate deception by priests. As a lamp that never goes out would be a powerful religious symbol. It would demonstrate divine favor, or the eternal nature of the deity. The priests would have every reason to maintain such a belief. Perhaps they secretly refilled it, or replaced it, and kept the secret tightly guarded. Historian of religion, Professor Mary Beard, often highlights how ancient cults used spectacle and mystery to enhance belief. The mystery of Lycidas' lamp and other ever-burning lamps fascinates us because it suggests a lost technology, or a lost scientific secret, a way to create light that seems to defy our understanding of combustion. Without the physical object, we can only rely on the ancient texts and our own imaginations. But The idea of a lamp that could truly burn forever, or at least for an incredibly long time, points to a potential knowledge of materials or chemistry that remains unexplained. What unknown fuel or chemical reaction could have kept these lamps burning for centuries? Were the priests simply perpetrating a clever hoax, or did they possess a genuine secret? Why has no such ever-burning lamp been definitively discovered and studied in modern times? Number 8. Did the legendary orichalcum of Atlantis shine with its own light? Orichalcum is a legendary metal. It is mentioned by Plato in his dialogues Critias and Timaeus. He describes it as a precious metal. It was mined on the lost continent of Atlantis. Plato says it was second only to gold in value, and that the Atlanteans used it to adorn their temples and palaces. They used it to plate their city walls, and it also was used to make their pillars. Plato's description of orichalcum includes unusual properties. He says it emitted a ruddy flash, a fiery glow, not just a reflection, but an intrinsic quality of the metal itself. This ruddy flash would have made the city of Atlantis truly spectacular, especially at sunset or dawn. Imagine entire buildings shimmering with a deep, reddish light. This would have been awe-inspiring. It would have shown the Atlanteans advanced knowledge and wealth. The identity of orichalcum has been debated for centuries. Some scholars believe it was a type of bronze or brass. An alloy, for example, some ancient coins from Sicily, dating to the 4th century BC, bear the inscription orichalcum. These coins are made of an alloy that looks like a brass, but brass does not naturally emit light. Other theories suggest it was an unknown metal or an alloy with unique properties that are now lost to us. What could cause a metal to emit a ruddy flash? One possibility is bioluminescence. This is light produced by friction or stress. If the orichalcum was a specific alloy or contained unique crystalline structures, perhaps rubbing or certain atmospheric conditions could make it glow. This might be a fleeting flash though, not a constant glow. Another highly speculative idea involves a form of cold luminescence. Perhaps the metal contained rare earth elements, or other elements that could phosphoresce or fluoresce under specific environmental conditions. For example, some minerals can glow after being exposed to UV light, or after absorbing energy from other sources. If Atlantis had advanced technology, they might have even found a way to charge the metal and make it glow for extended periods. Professor Andrea Caracciolo of the University of Messina published an article in 2017 about some ancient shipwreck finds off the coast of Sicily. They discovered 39 ingots of a mysterious metal. It was an alloy of copper, zinc, lead, and nickel. They identified it as orichalcum. While it didn't glow, it showed unique resistance to corrosion. This supports the idea of a special alloy, even if the light remains a mystery. The ruddy flash could also be interpreted metaphorically. It could mean the metal had a reddish gold hue, a very striking color, and in the bright Mediterranean sun, it would gleam powerfully, making it seem as if it was giving off light. The sheer spectacle of a city plated with such a rich, shining metal would be remarkable, and the flash could be the way the light catches it. Ultimately, orichalcum remains a legendary metal. We have no definitive samples, and no scientific proof of its luminous properties. But Plato's description fuels the imagination. It makes us wonder about lost technologies, and about the possibilities of metals with properties we don't fully understand. The idea of a glowing city, made possible by a mysterious metal, is a powerful one. If orichalcum truly existed and emitted a ruddy flash, what specific elements or alloys would give it this property? Was the light constant, or did it only appear under certain conditions, like pressure or specific light exposure? And if it was so common on Atlantis, why has no clear archaeological evidence of such a glowing metal ever been found? Number 7. Did the philosopher's stone truly glow with an inner light? The philosopher's stone, or lapis philosophorum, is the ultimate goal of alchemy. It is a legendary substance. It is said to turn base metals into gold and to grant eternal life. Alchemists pursued it for centuries, and their texts are full of cryptic descriptions of its properties. One of the most common descriptions is that stone possesses an inner light, a subtle yet powerful radiance. Alchemical texts describe the stone in its perfect form as often being a reddish or golden color. It is said to be translucent and to emit a soft, gentle glow, not a bright, blinding light, but a steady internal luminosity. This light was a sign of its purity, its perfection, and its condensed vital energy. It was often called the Red King or the Sun Stone. and its light was compared to the sun or to a radiant gem. For example, the 17th century alchemist Irenaeus Philotis, in his book An Open Entrance to the Shut Palace of the King, describes the stone as having a glowing incandescent heart. He implies that this light is a manifestation of its perfected spiritual and material state. It is not just matter, it is matter infused with spirit, and that spirit shines forth. What could this glowing property be based on? Alchemists were keen observers. They experimented with many substances. Some substances like phosphorus, which gets its name from light bearing, were discovered by alchemists. Phosphorus, in certain forms, glows in the dark. It exhibits chemiluminescence. It emits light through a chemical reaction. Could the alchemists have been describing an early discovery of a similar luminescent compound? Some historians of science, like Lawrence Principe, who studies early modern alchemy, point out that alchemists were not just mystics. They were also early chemists. They experimented with minerals, salts, and various chemical reactions. It is plausible that they sometimes produced substances that exhibited faint luminescence. Such a discovery would have been incredibly exciting. It would have been seen as a step towards creating the divine lapis. The glow could also be symbolic. The Philosopher's Stone was about enlightenment, about turning the base, ignorant into the noble wise. The inner light would represent this spiritual transformation. It would be the light of knowledge, the light of perfected wisdom. This is what the alchemists were truly seeking. However, if we take the literal description seriously, the idea of a self-luminous substance is fascinating. Perhaps a very stable, slow-reacting chemical, or a combination of minerals that would phosphoresce or fluoresce. Imagine a substance that absorbed ambient light, and then slowly released it in the darkness. To the alchemists, this would be a miracle. It would be evidence that they were close to transmuting matter itself. The pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone spanned centuries. It involved countless experiments. And while no one ever demonstrably created it, the enduring legend of its inner light continues to inspire. It speaks to humanity's desire for ultimate knowledge, and for the power to illuminate the darkness. What actual chemical compounds or reactions could have given the Philosopher's Stone its described inner light? Was the glow a byproduct of the transmutation process or an inherent quality of the perfected stone? And if alchemists truly created glowing substances, why was this knowledge never widely disseminated or reproduced? Number 6, were there ever gloom lanterns that lit ancient underworlds? Ancient Greek and Roman mythology often speaks of the underworld, a dark, shadowy realm, a place where the dead reside. Figures like Charon, the ferryman, navigate these gloomy waters. And in these stories, there are sometimes mentions of strange light sources. Not sunlight, not fire, but a cold, perpetual glow, a light source that belongs to the underworld itself. These are what we might call gloom lanterns. These aren't always described as physical objects that have been found, but the concept is there. Imagine an ancient tomb or a forgotten catacomb, sealed for centuries. And inside, there's a light, not a lamp that ran out of fuel, but something else. Something that seems to just be there, providing a dim, eerie illumination. This is the stuff of ancient horror stories, and sometimes archaeological whispers. For example, Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History 1st century AD, mentions a type of stone called lapis specularis. It was used by the Romans as window panes, but he also mentions other minerals with unique properties. While he doesn't describe glowing tomb lights, he lays the groundwork for understanding ancient knowledge of unusual mineral properties. The idea of cold light ties into some early scientific observations. In 1669, German alchemist Hennig Brand discovered phosphorus. He called it cold fire because it glowed without heat. This discovery came much later than ancient times, but it shows that the concept of a non-flame light source exists in nature. What if ancient peoples had stumbled upon something similar? One theory is that some highly unusual phosphorescent minerals were used. Imagine a specific type of rock or a clay mixed with certain compounds. These would absorb light during the day, then slowly emit it over very long periods in the darkness. In deep tombs where sunlight never reached, this light would be very faint. But in absolute darkness, it would be noticeable and terrifying. Researchers from the French National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS, in the 2000s explored ancient mineral usage in Roman catacombs. They found traces of phosphorescent minerals in some pigments, and even in some tomb decoration materials, though not strong enough for illumination. Another possibility is deliberate, clever engineering by ancient tomb builders. They might have used systems of highly polished metal mirrors, or even reflective surfaces combined with very slow-burning hidden fuels. Fuels that could smolder for, an extended time, giving off minimal heat, but a persistent glow. This would be very difficult to achieve, but the Romans were incredible engineers. There are also psychological factors. Entering a perfectly dark ancient tomb is disorienting. Any perceived light, any shimmer or reflection, could be interpreted as an intrinsic glow. The imagination can play tricks, especially when faced with the unknown, but the persistent legend of lights in tombs that were sealed for centuries is fascinating. It hints at a natural phenomenon, a lost technology, or a profound mystery. A light that defied decay, a light that kept vigil over the dead, a truly gloom lantern. What specific phosphorescent materials could ancient civilizations have used to create long-lasting cold light in tombs? Was this phenomenon a deliberate design by tomb builders or a natural occurrence they discovered and revered? If these gloom lanterns existed, why has no well-preserved example with a continuous glow ever been found and studied? Number 5. Could the Eye of Ra? Amulets have actually seemed to glow. The Eye of Ra is a powerful symbol in ancient Egyptian mythology. It represents the sun god Ra's fierce feminine aspect. It is a protective symbol. It is seen as a force of justice and vengeance. Amulets depicting the Eye of Ra were very common. They were worn by the living for protection and, placed with the dead for safe passage into the afterlife. These amulets were made from various materials: stone, faience, metal. While the Eye of Ra itself is a symbol of the sun and light, the amulets are not usually thought of as physically glowing. However, some ancient texts and modern speculative theories hint at specific amulets. Amulets made of rare materials. These might have seemed to emit a subtle, protective light, especially during certain rituals or in very dim conditions. This light would be a physical manifestation of its divine power. Think about the materials used. Ancient Egyptians were masters of mineralogy and gemology. They worked with lapis lazuli, carnelian turquoise, and various forms of quartz. Some minerals naturally phosphoresce or fluoresce. For example, certain types of fluorite or calcite. If an Eye of Ra amulet was crafted from such a mineral, it could absorb sunlight during the day, then slowly release a faint glow at night. This would certainly make it seem magical and very powerful. Dr. Joyce Tildesley, an Egyptologist at the University of Manchester, in her work Myths and Legends of Ancient Egypt, notes the Egyptians' deep belief in the power of materials, and how certain stones were believed to hold specific energies. Another idea relates to the rituals surrounding these amulets. The Egyptian priests often performed ceremonies in dimly lit temples, or at night under moonlight. The flickering shadows, the incantations, the intense focus, all could create a psychological effect. An observer might perceive a subtle shimmer or glow from the amulet, especially if it was highly polished, or made from a reflective material. This perception would enhance its protective qualities and its connection to the divine. Some more fringe theories suggest that certain dyes or pigments used on the amulets could have contained phosphorescent compounds. The Egyptians were masters of chemistry. They created vibrant, long-lasting colors. It is not impossible that they stumbled upon materials that could glow, although there's no direct evidence for intentional luminescent paints being used for this purpose. The Eye of Ra was meant to ward off evil, to shine a light into dark places, both literally and metaphorically. An amulet that physically glowed would have been seen as incredibly potent. It would have been a direct link to the power of the sun god himself. Imagine a traveler at night, protected by an amulet that pulses with a faint, warm light. It would bring comfort and inspire awe. Archaeological finds show countless Eye of Ra amulets, but none are known to visibly glow today. Over thousands of years, any subtle phosphorescence would likely have faded, or the chemical compounds broken down, but the legend, or the possibility, remains. It adds another layer of mystery to these powerful ancient symbols. What specific minerals or combinations of materials would allow these amulets to emit a subtle light? Was the light perceived by everyone, or only by those under specific ritualistic conditions? And if they glowed, did they offer genuine protection, or was the light simply a symbol of divine power? Number 4. Did the Urim and Thummim radiate divine judgment? The Urim and Thummim are mysterious objects from the Old Testament. They were used by the high priest of Israel to discern God's will. They are mentioned in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Their exact nature is unknown, but they were placed in a breastplate worn by the high priest. They were used to make important decisions, to deliver divine judgment. The Bible doesn't describe them as emitting light directly, but the context of their use often implies divine revelation, a clear answer from God. Some interpretations suggest that when the Urim and Thummim gave a positive answer, they would glow or shine brightly. And when the answer was negative, they would remain dull or dark. This would be a clear, unambiguous sign, a physical manifestation of God's direct communication. The names themselves are suggestive. Urim is often interpreted as lights or curses. Thummim is often interpreted as perfections or innocence, so lights and perfections, or lights and truth. This strongly links them to illumination and revelation. Biblical scholar Dr. Richard Elliott Friedman, in his book Who Wrote the Bible, delves into the priestly functions and the mystery of these objects. He suggests that the light aspect was central to their function as instruments of divine guidance. What could these objects have been? The most common theories are that they were two sacred stones, or lots, perhaps dice-like objects, or small polished gems. If they were stones, could they have had natural properties that caused them to glow? Some minerals can exhibit various forms of luminescence, like phosphorescence, which we discussed earlier, or triboluminescence. If the priest handled them, perhaps a certain pressure or motion could trigger a momentary flash of light. Consider the possibility of specific minerals, if they were made of quartz, for example. Quartz crystals have piezoelectric properties, meaning they can generate a small electrical charge under mechanical stress. This charge could cause a faint spark, or illuminate a tiny speck of a phosphorescent impurity. It would be a very subtle effect, but in a sacred, hushed environment, it would be profoundly significant. Another idea is that the light was purely symbolic or a result of interpretation. The high priest would wear the breastplate. He would ask a question, and then through prayer and ritual, he would see the answer in the Urim and Thummim, perhaps the way light reflected off their polished surfaces, or even a shift in color. These subtle changes could be interpreted as divine signals, much like how ancient seers interpreted patterns in clouds or animal entrails. Dr. Gordon Wenham, an Old Testament scholar, notes that the object's power derived from their divine appointment, not from any inherent magical quality. No physical Urim and Thummim have ever been found. They were likely lost after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BC, just like the Ark of the Covenant. So we are left with biblical accounts that suggest a powerful connection between these objects and divine light, a light that illuminated the path for ancient Israel. Were the Urim and Thummim literally luminous, or was their light a metaphor for divine clarity? What kind of materials could have given these ancient objects such a property if it was physical? Why were they lost, and what impact did their disappearance have on later Jewish religious practices? Number 3. Did the Dendera light really illuminate ancient Egyptian temples? The Dendera light is not an object you can pick up. It is a relief carving on the walls of the Hathor temple at Dendera, Egypt. This temple dates to the late Ptolemaic period, around 50 BC. The relief shows a very strange image. It shows large bulb-like objects. Inside these bulbs are snakes. The snakes stretch from a lotus flower, and the bulbs are connected by a cable to a box, and a figure, possibly a god, holds a knife. The whole scene looks eerily like an ancient light bulb setup. This image has sparked intense debate. Mainstream Egyptologists like Professor Joanne Fletcher from the University of York explain these reliefs as symbolic representations. They say the Ub is a lotus flower. The snake represents the god Harsumtis emerging from the flower, and the cable is the stem of the lotus. The box is a depiction of the Djed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the knife represents the cutting of evil. This is a common interpretation. It fits within the known framework of Egyptian religious symbolism. However, some alternative theorists, often called ancient astronaut proponents or lost technology advocates, see something else entirely. They believe the Dendera relief depicts actual ancient electrical technology, specifically giant light bulbs. They argue that the Egyptians had a secret knowledge of electricity, and they used these Dendera lights to illuminate their dark temples. The temples, deep underground, show no signs of soot from torches. This absence of soot is often cited as evidence. Eric von Daniken, in his 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, popularized this idea. He presented the dendrolite as proof of advanced ancient technology. What are the arguments for the light bulb theory? The shape of the bulb, the internal filament, the snake, the cable leading to a power source, the jet pillar. It looks incredibly similar to Crookes tube. This is an early vacuum tube. It can produce light when electricity passes through it. If the Egyptians had such knowledge, they could have created cold light. Light that wouldn't produce soot. But there are serious problems with this theory. There is no archaeological evidence of wires, or power generators, or any other electrical equipment in ancient Egypt. And no texts describe electricity or light bulbs. The DJ pillar, interpreted as a battery, is a well-understood religious symbol. Its connection to electricity is purely speculative. The no soot argument is also contested. Many temples do show soot, and others might have been lit by polished metal mirrors, or by oil lamps that produced minimal soot, or by openings in the ceiling allowing sunlight. And Dr. Rosalie David, an Egyptologist and director of the K&H Center for Biomedical Egyptology, has meticulously documented lighting methods in ancient Egyptian tombs and temples. She explains how simple oil lamps and reflective surfaces were highly effective. Still, the image remains compelling. It looks so modern, and the idea of an ancient civilization having such advanced technology is very exciting. It pushes us to question what we think we know about history, and it forces us to look closer at the evidence. Even if the mainstream explanation is symbolic, the visual similarity is striking, and it makes us wonder about possibilities. If the dendrolite relief truly depicts ancient technology, what power source did the Egyptians use to illuminate these bulbs? Where are the physical remains of these devices, and why has no other evidence of electrical technology been found in Egypt? What specific knowledge or scientific understanding would the Egyptians have needed to create such a complex light source? Number 2, did the lost city of Dwarka's artifacts emit a submarine glow? The lost city of Dwarka is a legendary ancient city in India. It is mentioned in the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. It was the kingdom of Lord Krishna. The epic describes Dwarka as a magnificent city. It was built on the coast, and it was highly advanced, but it was eventually submerged by the sea. This happened after Krishna left the earth. For centuries, Dwarka was considered purely mythical. Then, in the 1980s, marine archaeologists led by Dr. S.R. Rao of the National Institute of Oceanography began excavating off the coast of Gujarat. They found extensive underwater ruins. These ruins included walls, structures, and artifacts. They were consistent with the legendary city of Dwarka. This discovery was incredibly significant. It blurred the line between myth and history. While the Mahabharata doesn't explicitly mention glowing artifacts, the nature of a lost submerged city invites speculation. Imagine divers exploring ancient ruins underwater. In the murky depths, what if some of the artifacts, after centuries in the dark, seem to glow? Not a bright, powerful light, but a subtle, cold luminescence. This would be profoundly mysterious. And it would add to the mystique of a divinely built city. What could cause such a submarine glow? One possibility is deep-sea bioluminescence, certain bacteria or algae or other marine organisms. These can colonize surfaces, and they can produce light. If these organisms colonize specific types of stone or metal artifacts, they can make them appear to glow. Especially in the complete darkness of the deep sea, marine biologists have documented many such glowing organisms. A study in the Indian Journal of Marine Sciences in 2008 detailed various bioluminescent species in the Arabian Sea. Another idea relates to the materials themselves. If some artifacts contain phosphorescent minerals that absorb light and then slowly release it, for example, if they were exposed to sunlight for a short period before submerging, or if they contain specific trace elements. Over centuries, even a tiny amount of absorbed light could be released very slowly, creating a faint, long-lasting glow. This is a stretch, but in the deep, anything is possible. Also, some metals, when exposed to specific electrochemical reactions underwater, can sometimes create a very faint light. This is called sonluminescence, or even subtle triboluminescence from currents rubbing against structures. This is highly speculative for a persistent glow, but it adds to the mystery. Dr. Rao's team, in their extensive reports published in journals like Journal of Marine Archaeology throughout the 1990s and 2000s, cataloged thousands of artifacts. pottery, stone anchors, sculpture. They focused on structural and chronological evidence. They did not report any glowing artifacts, but the idea of a lost underwater city, with objects that have been in darkness for millennia and then brought into the light. It sparks the imagination. It makes us wonder what strange properties these artifacts might have developed, or what ancient knowledge might have been lost with the city. The legend of Dwarka and its rediscovered ruins continues to inspire. The idea of glowing artifacts from such a place adds another layer of wonder. It reminds us that the ocean holds secrets, secrets that might include light from an ancient submerged past. If artifacts from Dwarka did glow, what underwater conditions would sustain this luminescence for millennia? Were these objects designed to glow, or was it a natural consequence of their materials and environment? What role would such glowing artifacts play in the religious or daily life of an ancient city built by a god? Number 1. Did the legendary black stone of the Kaaba ever emit its own light? The black stone is one of the most sacred objects in Islam. It is embedded in the eastern corner of the Kaaba in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Millions of pilgrims kiss or touch it every year during the Hajj. The stone is not just a symbol. It is revered. Islamic tradition holds that it descended from heaven and that it was originally pure white, but it turned black over time due to the sins of humanity. While it is not seen as currently emitting light, ancient narratives and the concept of its divine origin sometimes include ideas of light, especially relating to its initial purity or its potential for future manifestation. The idea that it was white when it first came to Earth and that it still holds immense spiritual energy. This could be interpreted as a form of light, a subtle, divine glow. Consider its origin story. If it came from heaven or if it was a meteorite, it might have had unique properties. Some meteorites contain phosphorescent minerals, or they contain trace radioactive elements. If the stone was indeed a meteorite, it is possible that, when first discovered, it exhibited some form of faint luminescence, especially after being exposed to sunlight or during a celestial event. This initial glow could have been attributed to its divine nature, and its transition from white to black could be a symbolic representation of this fading light and the accumulating sins of humanity. Scholars like Dr. F.E. Peters, a historian of Islam, in his work Muhammad and the Origins of Islam, discuss the pre-Islamic veneration of sacred stones and how Islam integrated and reinterpreted these practices. These stones were often seen as living entities, or as conduits for divine power. A stone that might have initially glowed would have certainly commanded immense reverence. There are no scientific reports of the black stone emitting light today. It has been examined. It is often described as an opaque, dark rock, possibly a basalt or an agate, or a piece of impact glass from a meteorite. Its spiritual significance far outweighs any material properties. But the idea of its initial white state and its divine origin leaves room for speculation about a luminous past. The legends of the black stone's origin are powerful. They speak of a direct connection to the divine, and if this connection once manifested as a visible light, it would deepen its mystery and explain some of the awe surrounding it. The concept of something so pure, so divine, radiating light before being sullied by human sin, is a very compelling narrative. It speaks to the symbolic power of light as purity and grace. Did the black stone ever truly emit a pure white light, as described in some ancient traditions, or is this purely symbolic? If it was a meteorite, what specific mineral composition could have caused it to glow? And how did its supposed transition from white to black influence its spiritual significance throughout history?